Welcome to our August 30th, 2023 Charter Chat. Next slide, please. So before I go over the agenda, I wanted to do just a few housekeeping things. The first thing is that everyone should be muted. So if you haven't checked, please take a look at your screen to make sure that you are muted. You may put questions into the chat, and there will be a Q&A at the end where you can come off mute and ask your question or put your question in the chat. The session is being recorded, as you heard earlier, and we will only be recording in the main room. The breakout rooms will not be recorded. All right, so today's agenda includes some introductions of our team, and then you'll have an opportunity to put some stuff in the chat to introduce yourself. We're going to remind you what's in the parking lot. We're actually going to do a quick review of the number of authorizers CASI has interacted with over the past 2 years. We will review some questions from the field and or from our July charter chat. And we have a special guest, Janice Kwan from the El Dorado SELPA, here to discuss some updates on the financial front. We will talk about some legislative issues and give an SBE, State Board of Education, update, and then we'll cover some hot topics. Next slide, please. Oh, before we go into our breakout rooms, we'll also do breakout rooms. So as you know, CASI is a collaboration among CDE, the California Charter Authorizing Professionals, and the Santa Clara County Office of Education. The names on this slide represent our partners at CCAP. And today we are joined by Dr. David Patterson and by Janice Kwan. Next slide, please. Okay, I think we skipped a slide. Can you go back a couple of slides? Oh, I guess we didn't. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Allison to take us through CASI by the numbers.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Allison Ball from the California Department of Education's Charter Schools Division. Normally, I'm sort of lurking in the shadows of CASI events because I like to give the spotlight over to our wonderful subgrantees, Santa Clara County Office of Education and CCAP. But today, I'm just here to share a couple of bright spots. We have been looking at CASI by the numbers as the program has been running for about 1.5 years now, and just thrilled to share with you all some of the growth that the program has made. One of the biggest areas that we are tracking is engagement. Obviously, you know, if folks are enjoying the content, they're going to attend. We look at unique authorizers that attend, looking at how many of the probably now 330 authorizers, we believe there may be a new authorizer in the mix, are attending CASI events, and we are very close to our goal of 50% attendance of all authorizers across the state. So if you've got a friend out there who hasn't come to an event, please give them a little nudge and encourage them to join CASI. Next slide, please. We also look at engagement by authorizer type, and some of the biggest areas that we are looking to support is looking at rural and small authorizers, and also virtual or primarily virtual authorizers. So again, if you have somebody out there, a colleague in the field who is in one of those categories, please do encourage them to join us. Very last plug for you is that we did review that material from the annual authorizer survey. Thank you to everybody who completed that. And we do use that information to inform future CASI events. So thank you to everyone who is encouraging, who is putting in that feedback to let us know about topics you're interested in for the future. With that, I'm going to hand it back. Next slide, please.
And before we go on to the parking lot, I do just want to take a moment to say that I introduced the CCAP members of the team. I also want to just say that the SECOE folks are also here with us. So we have Michelle Johnson, Michelle Wave, I'm Mifala Fairley, and then we have 3 other members of our team who are actually in a all hands meeting right now. So they're not here, but they are Matt Doherty, Shalu Sharma, and Cynthia Tapia. So those folks make up the rest of the CASI team. So for the parking lot, we keep this slide here to remind us of the many questions, the variety of questions that we get from the field. And so we are looking for answers for these. We work with folks at the department to get answers. And so we're still working on these questions. You may recognize that material revisions is still on the list. And the reason it's still there is because during the quarterly regional training, some additional cases came up, or some additional questions came up, and some requests for more information like case studies and sample staff reports came up. And so we have put material revisions back on the parking lot while we're working on gathering that information for you. Next slide, please. All right, turning it over to Michelle.
Actually, this is going to Dave.
Okay.
Actually, it goes to Dave. And first, I want to say there's some answers that are relatively complex here. And I want to refer you to the fact that we have on our resource pages all the stuff I'm going to be saying, plus some more. So don't worry about making all these fancy notes, but I'll try to give you an overview, but then please check out the resource page. So here are some of the previous Charter Chat questions. What are the changes in the use of oversight fees? And how are authorizers tracking their fees? Well, the response that we have is, effective 2014, authorizers may charge the actual oversight cost not to exceed 1% of revenue. Now, there are times where, and they're relatively rare, that you're providing a school with a substantially rent-free facility, and then you can charge your actual oversight cost not to exceed 3%. And you can use a number of ways to track your costs, including time accounting, full-time equivalent, which when you're a larger shop and you have full-time people assigned, and that sort of stuff. So that's a little bit of information there. The second one was what authorizer oversight templates and documentations are available. Well, again, we refer you back to the Ed Code 47604.32. And it talks about that each charter school must be visited at least annually. And this is where you review the operations, the academic performance, fiscal viability, the host of things that are out there. And you have the opportunity to meet with parents and others. You review the governance of the school and all that. There are best practices to provide a report to the governing board of the charter school. CCAP, California Charter Authorizing Professionals, has created an annual visit toolkit. And the Santa Clara County Office of Education has an annual site visit resources. Again, look on the resource page where there are live links that get you to that information. And then what are WOEA programs? And that's been pronounced many a different way, but these are programs that are designed for eligible youth, 14 to 24, who face one or more specific barriers to unemployment. The youth programs emphasize the attainment of basic skills, competencies, and enhanced opportunities for academic and occupational training, and provides an exposure to the job market and employment. Now, for charter schools, as per Ed Code 4761.2.1, charter school programs that provide instructions exclusively in partnership with the following programs are not subject to the jurisdictional locational limitations of Ed Code section 47612. And those are the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Grant, which is WIA, federally affiliated youth build programs, federal Job Corps training or instructional programs pursuant to a memorandum of understanding with the federal provider, and the California Conservation Corps. And WOEA and other partnership charter schools are reviewed in the same oversight process as other charter schools. So that's a quick response to them. Again, look at the resource page for more information. Okay, back to you.
And I'm handing it over to Michelle.
All right, so as Dave so aptly put it, there were lots of questions. So the next question said, in the event for a county authorized renewal petition is denied and appealed to the State Board of Education, I assume that the State Board of Education will only be looking for abuse of discretion at the COE level, given that the district had nothing to do with the process. So the both district and county standard is not applicable in this scenario. Is that correct? And the answer to that is, well, on the renewal of a countywide charter, there is no mechanism for appeal to the state board. But with the district charter, that since it was just only dealing with a renewal at the county, then it would only be focusing on the county. So yes, the question is correct. Second question, is there anything in statute that would prevent a school from submitting a renewal early? State board, SB 114 amended Education Code 47607.4 to automatically extend the terms of the charter schools that expire on or before January 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2027. So in order to ensure the availability of sufficient data, charter renewals may be heard the beginning of fiscal year 2024-25 and or at the conclusion of the year immediately preceding the final year of the charter school's term. CDE recommends that the process begin with sufficient time for appeals if needed before the charter term has expired. Please note that consistent with past practice and the law, the CDE will not accept an appeal of a renewal decision before the final year of the charter school's term. So for more information, please check the charter school renewal webpage. Last question is, if a charter school qualifies for differentiated assistance and their authorizer is the COE, who is also the GO lead, who would support the charter schools with differentiated assistance? There are proposals to address this in the state budget trailer bill, cleanup bill that are in process and not finalized at this time. The CDE is planning to include a presentation on differentiated assistance at next month's state and federal program directors meeting on September 22nd from 9 to noon. And you can get additional information from our resource page. And moving on, next slide.
Thank you. So now is the time in our program where we ask you to rename yourself in preparation for our breakout rooms. So a couple of things to think about. Decide which region you're in. Are you considering yourself part of the northern region? If so, then you're going to put a 1 in front of your name. And after your name, put the name of your organization. If you're considering yourself to be from the central region, then put a 2 in front of your name. And after your name, put the name of your organization. If you're from the southern region of California, put a 3 and then your organization name after your name. And if you are not an authorizer, but you are an authorizing partner, for example, you're from a charter school or a nonprofit organization, then you are going to put 4 in front of your name and then the name of your organization after your name. And there will be a couple more reminders of this, and we really would like you to take a moment and do this because it makes it much easier on our folks behind the scenes who have to get the breakout rooms organized. Okay, next slide. All right, Michelle, you're gonna take on legislative updates for us.
Right. So on the legislative updates, there won't be really any legislative updates for a while right now. Most bills are in suspense at the moment, and we will not know their disposition until the Appropriations Committee takes actions on their suspense file on September 1st. So hopefully we'll have more information for you next month.
Great. Next slide. And Michelle, do you want to talk about the state board and the ACCS?
Davis.
Yes. Yes. Okay. The state board updates. First, the Advisory Commission on Charter School meeting was held on August 8th. The ACCS heard an appeal of the denial of the establishment of Vista Legacy Global Academy, and the ACCS recommended that the SBE hear that appeal, which is one of the steps in the process under the new rules for state board appeals. The state board itself will be meeting on September 13th through the 14th. Back to you, Ms. Ifla.
Great, thank you. All right, so we are moving on to hot topics, which is news you can use right now. Next slide, please. All right.
Okay.
Oversight.
So program oversight. Right now, we are at back to school level. So please make sure that you are looking at your 23-24 oversight documents, meaning document review, annual visits, etc. You should probably be looking at the local control accountability plans. You will probably be wanting to go back and look at your charter school's website review and review those to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. And finally, you should be looking at teacher credentials to ensure that all of the teachers are appropriately credentialed for their positions. And if there's anything at this moment that you are working on that I didn't put in the list, can you add some of those things to the chat so that everybody can see what everyone's kind of working on right now? I know that at the county level, we're also doing Williams visits on top of all of these different pieces. So hopefully we'll see some ideas of things that we should keep on our radar right now in the chat.
Great. So we'll come back to the chat in just a moment after Janice has an opportunity to talk about some of the other program oversight, or actually fiscal oversight topics.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Before I jump in around credentialing, just want to share with you, there is an opportunity for LEAs to have their special education staff partake in training or professional development that should be offered through most SELPAs. And it's where they can receive what they call a bridge authorization to expand who they can provide services to for students with disabilities. And so if your charter schools are struggling with, which most of them are, as districts are, with staffing, especially around special education, that is a way for their team to be able to expand their credential authorization. We here at El Dorado are providing those trainings, and we're providing it beyond just our charter schools. So I'm happy to share that information with you, but I know a lot of SELPAs are providing that training. And then the applicant submits proof that they attended the training to CTC, they pay the fee, and they should be able to get a new credential showing those authorizations. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on that. So I was asked to speak to some changes in special education funding that you may or may not be aware of. One is around just the AB 602 base funding, the state revenue that is generated. The second is around mental health funding, and then some recent trailer bill language that will be affecting SELPAs. And I know there was a question around excess cost. I was not aware about any change with excess cost, and I did reach out to some of my fiscal colleagues. So if anyone has that specific question, maybe we can connect offline to get more information around excess cost and questions you may have. I believe, was a slide prepared with my talking points, or is this it?
This is it.
All right, I can do it. All right. Disclaimer, I am not a fiscal person, so I will do my best to explain this. The base rate change is really around the funding exhibits. Now every charter school, regardless of whether they are their own LEA or not, their ADA will be pulled out and shown in funding exhibits. So even if it's under their authorizers funding exhibits, their ADA will be pulled out. And it is every LEA is being funded on highest of the 3 years of ADA. So current and then the 2 previous years. And then their funding for that year will be based off of whichever is the highest. It will still flow through the SELPA, but the SELPA actually now has a requirement to post what each LEA is generating based on their ADA, regardless of their allocation plan. So they still have an allocation plan that is still a governance decision based on the LEA, whether they're a multi-district LEA or a single. district LEA. So that still is in place, but just the funding exhibits are now broken out. Where it gets interesting is when charter schools choose to become their own LEA for special education. And this is something that you as authorizers, if you have charter schools with you, you should be aware of, or if you are supporting multiple authorizers, should be aware of that. When a charter school chooses to become their own LEA, that funding now goes with them, even the prior years. So there used to be a hold harmless, where the current SELPA would be held harmless in the impact of the loss of that ADA. That is now no longer the case. So when you're working with charter schools and they're looking to become their own LEA, it's something that you definitely want to make sure you are having conversations with your SELPA director and the potential impact, whoever is representing you as an authorizer in this SELPA on their governance council, that they understand the potential impact that will have overall on this SELPA and their allocation plan. So making sure that you're connecting with the SELPA director. If you're not sure who that is, happy to also try to make those connections for you. But any change in LEA status for a charter school will have a fiscal impact on the SELPA and on the other LEAs that are members within that SELPA as well. And it will require potentially an allocation plan revision for that SELPA. The next thing is mental health funding. Now, mental health funding no longer is directed through SELPAs. It is directed to every LEA, including charter schools. And so this is another shift that charter schools may not be aware of, and they will be receiving GANs. And so they need to make sure that they're receiving those GANs, signing the GANs, and submitting them back to CDE to make sure that they are getting access to this funding. The funding has also now, the past few years, the restrictions around the use of the funding has been lifted. It used to be only for students with IEPs that had mental health supports and services identified in their IEP. It is now open up to all students, regardless of whether they have an IEP or not. So it's just something for you to be aware of with your charter schools, making sure they understand they'll be receiving this money, and they do have an obligation to report on the use of the funds, still making sure that it goes for mental health supports and services to any student that they have. If they choose to still continue to focus on students with IEPs, they may do so, but it is some of the restrictions have been lifted. The last thing is around trailer bill language. It actually currently is a 1-year change at the SELPA level. And basically it states for the 23-24 school year that SELPAs must allocate the same amount of revenue to their LEAs with the COLA that they did in 22-23. The challenge is for SELPAs that have declining enrollment. So this may require an allocation plan change, or if they already have allocation plan decisions in place where what they call take off the top, to be able to provide for other pools, other local commitments that the members of that SELPA have agreed to. So I'll give you an example of what we here at the Charter SELPA did. With the change in mental health funding directly to LEAs and how we had it through our allocation plan, we had charter schools that were benefiting from what we call the non-public school RTC pool, where if they had students that needed a more restrictive placement, they could access that pool to offset the costs of that placement. So with the shift of mental health going directly to LEAs, many LEAs obviously wouldn't have that pool or access to that pool anymore. So our charter partners agreed to take off the top of AB 602 funding per ADA to continue to fund that pool. Well, we wanted to make sure that that didn't affect the trailer bill language where we had to allocate the same amount out to our LEAs last year this year. So we will be making some small changes in language to our allocation plan to make sure that we're accounting for the change in trailer bill language and making sure that we're allocating the same, if not more, of what we did in the prior year. I believe there's some questions. So first one, what if they made the move prior to this year? Does the funding move now? Yes. Yeah, Barbara. So the funding would go with the charter school to the new SELPA.
And also, Janice, Zach is asking where schools will report their mental health funding. You mentioned that they have a GAN and they have to do some reporting.
Yeah, so I don't know all the ins and outs, but just like they have to report end of year reporting on expenditures, they would have to do the same thing for the mental health. Zach, I can get more clarity on that from my fiscal team on exactly what we can expect with that. I think the biggest, because there is federal funding. So the majority of mental health funding is state, but there is a small, it's about $11 per ADA that they will get in federal funding.
Do you know, is that coming quarterly then? Is that not going to flow via the monthly apportionment schedule then?
No, I think it funds the monthly apportionment schedule. Same as, yeah.
So because it's what, $80.91 per ADA for mental health? And there's the $11 on top of that, or is that wrapped into it?
No, I think the $11 is wrapped into it. But I can get clarity on that.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. I know it's coming the same apportionment monthly. I know that piece.
All right. Thank you, Janice, so much for your information. I wanted to go back before Michelle finished up. She asked the question, what are other folks working on as part of their back to school tasks? And I wanted to point out that in the chat, Jeff from Fresno says he's working on early enrollment counts and on liability or insurance policies. Definitely two things that people need to take a look at. Susan says that she is preparing for oversight visits. Would love to know what that preparation looks like. So maybe you can talk about that in your breakout group, Susan. And I think that's it. I think those are the only two people who responded to your question, Michelle.
Kelly answered also Prop 39 and facilities.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you for participating. Next slide, please. So I have another reminder for those of you who have not yet renamed yourself by adding the group that you would like to be placed into and the name of your organization. So if you haven't done that, please do so. Group 1 will be Northern California Authorizers. Group 2 will be Central California Authorizers. Group 3 will be Southern California Authorizers, and Group 4 are our non-authorizing partners. And so on the slide on your screen, you can see how you should rename yourself. The number should be the first thing, followed by your name, followed by the organization. And the reason we want the number in the beginning is it makes it easier for our people behind the scenes to put you into the correct breakout group when the number of your group is first. So take a moment to do that, please. Okay, next slide. All right, so we're ready to go into our breakout rooms. Before you go into breakout rooms, could someone drop the link for the Jamboard into the chat? And if you are Amanda, oh, sorry. Let's see, Mifala, that's me, Dave, Allison, and Michelle, please make sure you have the link to the Jamboard so that you can display that for the folks in your group. And breakout room hosts, you will facilitate your groups, starting with introductions. If you have more than 20 people, Maybe just have the new folks introduce themselves so that you don't spend the whole time doing introductions. In your breakout groups, you can use the time to follow up on something that was covered earlier, talk about the tasks that people should be working on right now in terms of monitoring and oversight, ask questions, maybe get some feedback from your colleagues on things that you're working on or have questions about. So it's kind of an opportunity for you all to share. Breakout rooms will not be recorded. And so if we're ready, if we're ready behind the scenes, I think we can go ahead and get into, I'm sorry, let me say who the facilitators are. So for the Northern California group, Amanda, please make sure you have the Jamboard link that should have been dropped into the chat. And thank you, Amanda, for agreeing to facilitate. Sean, you should also have the Jamboard link. Mark Padford and Michelle Johnson, please make sure you have the links. All right, I think we're ready to go.
Opening now.
I'm not going to ask for every group to report out, but if there was something that you discussed in your group that you think is important for all of us to know, go ahead and come off mute if you are the facilitator for that group and share.
I have one question, Nicola. We ended our conversation, our session, talking about LCAP, and one of my colleagues posted a question in the chat, and I'm curious to find out the answer to it. And I believe it had to do with approval of the LCAP. Was it required, or does it just need to be on the charter school board agenda? I'd like a little more clarity on that.
My understanding, and somebody else please jump in, is that the charter school board approves the LCAP.
Absolutely. The charter school board has to approve the LCAP for each individual school. It cannot just be a just sit on the agenda. It needs to actually be an action item.
I know a lot of our charter
once they submit to the question was specifically the LCAP mid-year update. That just needs to be brought up. But the LCAP itself needs to be approved by the board at the charter level. It does not now need to be approved by the authorizer too. So.
Okay. Sean, did you have your hand up? Were you going to make a comment? No? Okay. All right. So.
Can I share something from our breakout room, I think?
Sure.
So from the Northern California group, we had 2 questions that came up that we didn't quite have answers to, but might be a topic that is relevant in the future. One was about how charter schools may be required or not required to enroll students who have been expelled from districts. And the other was a question about how to track when students are being counseled out of schools. And since those are both questions sort of about how do we support and keep an eye on our schools in terms of making sure they're serving the students that they say that they're going to serve and that they're intended to serve, that might be an area that would be of clarification that would serve a lot of us in the future.
Thank you, Amanda. All right. I see Indra's hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring from our group, we're talking a little bit about CalSAS because that, that's that time is coming up. And we had identified in our group that schools are starting to get savvy with that, and there's figuring out ways to sort of game the system on the CalSAS reports. And so we're just promoting as a best practice to authorizers that they ask their schools for the CalPADS report of staffing assignments. So it's CalPADS report 4.3, and they actually compare that CalPADS report to the school's master schedule, because that'll help catch some of those issues. And just so people are aware, the three issues we're seeing is, one, they're putting somebody as the teacher of record who's not really the teacher of record, but has the proper credential, like the assistant principal or a TOSA dean or something like that. Two, they may just not even report the class. It's an elective that their teacher can't teach, and so they just don't even report it on CalPads. Or three, they put the incorrect class. The teacher can't teach drama, but they can teach speech. So they'll report it in CalPads as speech, even though on the transcripts and the master schedule and everything, it says drama. And in each of those cases, CalSAS is going to say everything looks fine. The credential looks fine, or the class code looks fine. And so you won't see as an exception. You wouldn't even know to investigate or look at it. It would just seem like everything was perfect. But if you print out that CalPads report, then you may see that. You'll say, hey, why is that person listed as a teacher of record? I know they're an assistant principal, or I know they're out of the classroom, or, why is that listed as a speech class on CalPads when I see on the master schedule it's listed as drama or something like that.
Thanks for that. That is a topic that came up in our Northern California group as well. So thank you for sharing that with the group. All right. Are there any other comments that came out of or discussions that came out of your groups that need to be shared with the whole group? Okay. Next slide, please. And we have a survey, and I think that Allison is going to drop the link. Please give us some feedback on how this meeting went for you and what you need to make it a better use of your time. Next slide, please. All right, questions from the main room, or do we have time for that? I think we can, no time for questions. All right. If you have a question, drop it in the chat and we'll come back to it next week. Next slide, please. Dave.
Okay. Upcoming events. The next charter chat is September 27th. So please make it on your calendar. And then I want to make sure that you're aware that Authorizing 101 and or Fiscal 101, we are bringing those to you via Zoom or locally if you, in fact, are looking for additional support. Let me get to that slide that tells me some additional information. So the October 23rd quarterly meeting will be on Charter Board oversight. Authorizers will learn tips and tricks regarding the continuum of oversight practices. Topics we're going to include are Brown Act, Political Reform Act, Governance Code, 1090, bylaws, policies, and articles of incorporation. So this is our first time where we're looking more closely at the board's responsibilities itself as a charter board. School district and county office of education staff of authorizing responsibilities are encouraged to attend, and additional information about this event and other upcoming events are at our web link, which is on screen right now, and it'll be part of the follow-up materials.
Great, thank you. Next slide. These are some additional events. Charter Authorizer Connection Professional Learning, October 13th. And the link for registration is there, which you will be able to access when you get the resource materials. And then in January, we have Governance and Oversight with FICMAT and the National Charter Institute on May 10th. And I'm guessing that the registration information for that is coming soon. Next slide. And you can contact us at CASI@cde.ca.gov. And last slide. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And again, if you have any questions, drop them into the chat before you leave. Fill out our survey for this session and have a great week. See you next month.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.